I'm not going to keep this video long. I was aggravated. Actually, had a great day. But as I get back and I'm looking at the news and I'm looking at what's going on, and I see this article, and I think to myself, you stupid idiots. You stupid, stupid idiots. When George Bush went into Iraq, Germany had enough sense to be like, we're skeptical of that. France had enough sense to be, we're skeptical of that. In which case we said, okay, we're not going to have French fries anymore. We're going to have freedom fries. We were angry at the French because the French didn't get involved in a war of aggression that ends up getting 1 million Iraqis killed. This, however, economic war against Russia, how important is Ukraine to you? Just as a regular American, whatever you do in life, you could be a barista, you could be a haberdasher, you could be the guy that does the street, whatever you do in your life, you go home, you have sex with this random person, you play your Xbox, you get a pizza, you go to bed, you rinse and repeat. That's your life. And your life is difficult enough with the bills you have to pay, with the responsibilities you have to deal with. And part of those bills that you have to pay is gas in the car to get to work, to do the job that allows you to have sex with that woman and to play that Xbox and to have the electricity to keep your lights on, etc., etc., etc. These are the things that make up a life. At the very least, what a life is today. That stuff costs. There's a cost to all of it. To play your Xbox, there's an electricity cost. To get in your car, there's a gasoline cost. All of those things are cost. And in the context of those costs, the question becomes, okay, what is the legitimate cost of a particular thing? With all things being equal. Now, what happens when it's not all things being equal anymore? It's your president and the bunch of idiots that decided to go with that president decided that they wanted to knock over a government in order for this geopolitical influence in Europe. We want to screw with Russia. That's what we want to do. We want to poke the bear. We want to tweak Putin's nipples as he's riding that bear. That's what we wanted to do. So when the Soviet Union falls and we have the opportunity to, make peace, get it over with, world peace, go to the stars, etc. We don't do that. We don't do that. All sorts of promises were made to Russia. We won't expand. We won't take advantage. And we did the opposite of all of it. Not only did we take advantage, those oligarchs that they're talking about, the shock capitalism that had 100,000 Russians die in order for us to basically profit. Basically, various people in the United States took massive advantage. And because of the way we changed over their system and everything else, a lot of people died. We decided to expand NATO, 13 nations. NATO was specific to the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, NATO should have went with it. But instead, hey, let's use NATO as a power projection device led by the United States and Europe. That's what we're going to do. No, the original intent of that power projection device is no longer there. But the fact that it is not there, it means that we have that much power to project because there is no opposition in this case. We won. Unipolar world. And NATO will be our instrument in Europe. I'm trying to make this point that it didn't have to be that way. That was a choice. There was a choice for power projection. And part of that is, hey, let's expand. Let's expand. We won't never have another Soviet Union. Let's expand. There will never be another device, another state, another edifice in our world that could ever rival us. That's what we need to do. So we're going to gobble up this nation and that nation and that nation and that nation. And the promises that NATO won't expand 1 inch to the east were completely ignored. And not just 1 inch, but up to the border. And then it gets to Ukraine. On the border, large country. Ukraine by itself, what? The name means borderland, for God's sake. And you have an east and you have a west. And the east, ethnic Russians. The West, not. And just so happened that people in the West, there is a bit of, let's say, neo-Nazism, or let's say fascism or racism whatever you want to call it, but definitely a hatred of the people in the East. Now, for all intents and purposes, this wasn't, at least based on the reports that we've had and based on the people we've talked to who were on the ground, this wasn't this kind of contentious thing. But it was made contentious as this kind of conflict became, okay, are we going to be closer to Europe? Are we going to be closer to Russia? It's on Russia's border. You would think, rationally, that yeah, they probably would be more in that orbit. And at the very least, you have people in the country who were. You have an election. Yanukovych wins it. And for a while, he governs. He gets posed with a question. Are you going to be closer to Europe? Are you going to be closer to Russia? Now, at this point, the United States has a huge amount of influence in the country. They have NGOs in that country. You have a neo-Nazi aspect of that country that is real, regardless of what mainstream media says. I can show you 10 articles talking about it before all of this basically took place. These guys have flag marches and insignias and all sorts of stuff. Yanukovych doesn't take the European deal because it's not in his best interest. And just calls for a pause. And at the point where the pause takes place, all hell breaks loose. You have Nazis, you have a far-right takeover of the government with Yanukovych being deposed because they were trying to murder him. That's a coup. By any stretch of the imagination, that's a coup. You have people in the United States basically choosing who's going to be in power. And it is clear at this point that we were intimately involved in knocking over that government. Why am I saying this? Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because the gas prices that you're paying for right now, the food, the increases in inflation that you and the people in Europe and the rest of the world, the famine that is going to be created, all of that stuff is a culmination of decades of policy to encircle and to create, let's say, a fait accompli for any potential conflict with Russia. Ukraine just so happened hit the fan now. But the point that I'm making here is that why in the hell would any of us give two shits about Ukraine? And from the standpoint of this geopolitical policy, why would any American in this country playing your Xbox, getting your car to work, etc., why would you want to invest your money, your time, and attention into getting yourself and provoking a conflict abroad? That's what your government is doing. And this notion of an economic war after the fact, yes, we're going to fight to the last dead Ukrainians. So we're going to give them weapons, we're going to give them money, and we're going to repeat what we did in Afghanistan and trying to drag the Soviet Union, in this case, Russia, into a certain Vietnam. This will not be another Vietnam. Russia is accomplishing its military objectives. Yes, the weapons are killing Russians. The weapons that the NATO basically are handing over to Ukraine in order to do so. The point that I'm making here is, why, as an American, would you want us fucking around in a way that is going to blow back and hit us? So the rest of the world decides we're going to have an economic war. Don't want to make it hot. Economic. And we're going to bury the Russian economy. Except for gas. Not going to touch gas. We need gas. Can't get by without gas. But everything else, hammer of God. Now, what did I say weeks ago? I said, why do you believe that Russia is going to stand there and allow you to do that and not have a consequence? Why not? Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Rational actor who has objectives and need to mitigate certain damage will take action. All incentives in the world say they will take action to try to mitigate the damage and try to get advantage. This is a war of attrition, right? You're taking an action, I'm going to take an action. My action is going to try to hurt you every bit as much as you're trying to hurt me, not to mention mitigate the damage that you're doing. Russia comes out and says, fine, we want gas to be paid in rubles. You've stolen our money. You're trying to say we can't use your money. Then it is no point in us taking your money since it is utterly and entirely worthless. We're not going to give you a product for worthless money. Europe had a collective shit fit. And I said, I predicted this. Why didn't you? What the hell are your leaders doing? It's almost as if they never looked at this and thought to themselves, can we actually sustain, in literal world physical matter reality terms, the policies that we're putting forth? Now, the U.S., at this point, we're going to become a world gas supplier. So the answer is yes, even though it will hurt. Europe, no. Europe, no. But the collective bunch of idiots in Europe decide, yeah, we're going to follow Joe Biden. We're going to follow that dementia-riddled, potentially shit his pants with the Pope, barely awake, falls asleep in meetings, low approval level, even in the United States. We're going to follow that guy. That guy who has less sense than George Bush. That's the guy who we're going to follow. And we're going to punch ourselves as hard as we possibly can in the genitals. Yes, we're Europe. How's that economic war going? Huh? How's it going for you? Meaning, whatever damage you believe you're doing to Russia, okay, fair enough. You got your hits. I live here in the United States. The Europeans live over there. And the question that you need to answer is, how much is it worth to have Ukraine in your orbit? How much? You, average American, playing your Xbox, having sex with that random woman. How much is it worth? Meaning, is it worth all of the stuff, the global recession that they are about to start, just to have Ukraine, a country that you could not even find on a map, that is nowhere near you, in your particular orbit, because a few people in your country wants to find a way to knock over the Russian government? When Joe Biden said that in his speech, that was the culmination of 40 years of policy. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't an accident. He was articulating what he actually and really legitimately wanted. And the reason that the press freaked out like that is because you are saying the quiet part out loud, shut up. Shut up. You're not supposed to say that. Now, it's one thing if he believed he had enough of the world with him when he's saying that, and he thinks he's going to get support. He didn't get support for that. People freaked out. You stupid idiot. You said the quiet part out loud too soon. Regardless if I'm saying the quiet part out loud, do you think that Putin doesn't know that? Meaning, do you think he is blissfully unaware that the United States looks at the world as a zero-sum game? He can see nations get knocked over. He's seen the number of governments the U.S. has knocked over. He's seen the way that we would invade a country, kill a lot of people, and the propaganda around it will basically settle the American public and blind them and whitewash them for the crimes that are committed in their names. Whether it's Libya, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Honduras, where they put that narco drug lord in there, now they're trying to lock him up. You can go across the map. At which point was this love and light? If he's looking at that, what does he think? Joe Biden articulated an actual policy. He just doesn't have the power to do it, nor does he have the competence or the sense. And unfortunately for Europe, this is the guy, this dementia-riddled old man that should be eating applesauce in an old folks' home. That's who you decided to follow. How's it going for you? This is Germany. Right here. Appearing on Maybrit Illiter's political talk show on Thursday, Siegfried Russwurm, the chairman of the Federation of German Industries, clashed with other guests who were calling for an immediate halt to Russian gas. Ooh, I love it. We have an ideological position. Let's defund the police. Let's defund the police. What are the consequences? Who cares about the consequences? We have an ideological position. Right here. Russwurm pointed out that such an embargo introduced implications would be immense, going well beyond speed limit on highways and recessions and unemployment, as host suggests. Without Russian gas, there will come a virtual failure of our industrial networks, the head of BDI forecasting. He added that it was currently impossible to put a price on potential losses and even give a ballpark figure on how much it would cost the average German. But you don't care whether that's the average German, the average Spanish person, the average Croatian, the average American. You don't care. We're talking about a whole different kind of collapse of industry, Russwurm argued, adding that Germany could see a disintegration of the very industry it was, quote, so proud to have seen us through the COVID pandemic. The BDI chairman took issue with, quote, a Fridays for Future, unquote, campaigners called to move away from gas altogether and embrace renewables instead of becoming dependent on another autocrat. He is telling them, I get how you feel. I get how you feel. But as somebody who is in the industry and who looks at the stuff, it would collapse. Just where we are now. Just where we are now. Not even going beyond that point. Just where we are now. Right here. This is rubles of gas. This is UK. Strikes in UK at highest in 5 years. Its pay is hit by inflation April 2nd. Just so we're clear. UK energy beer soars as benefits fall and inflation curbs consumer spending. Oh, it's going so well. Germany will face up to 10% inflation due to embargo on Russia. By the way, that's not including gas. That's not even including gas. We haven't even got the gas. Those Germans are like, yeah, shut off the pipes. Shut off the pipes. Fuck it. Fuck it. Who needs gas? Who needs heat and lights and energy? Who needs that shit? We have our ideology. Spanish inflation unexpectedly soars to almost 10% on war. Spain is not even at war. 10%. By the way, it's only been a month. It's only been a month. There's a decoupling that is taking place that these guys are involved in. And by the way, that's not just Europe, that's the United States. I mean, it's been NATO nations that's been doing this, right? The Fed favorite inflation measure ticked even higher last month. There's a line in here. It's not that one. U.S. inflation rises to 40-year peak in February by Fed's preferred measure. That's in February. We're in April. That's not going to get better. Is recession indicating blinking or on the blink? There's a lot right here. An inverted yield curve was almost dismissed back in 2006 by then Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke. He said in February that year, I think at this point in time that the inverted yield curve is not signaling slowdown. That was a little more than a year before the financial crisis tipped the United States into the worst depression since the Great Depression. They make this point about yield curves. I would have to get Mark Frost. I don't even want to try to explain that. I get it. It has to do with short-term versus long-term. You would expect to get more money in the long term, so it tends to be higher. When it goes to short-term, is more advantageous. It indicates that the people are getting very dicey about how the economy is going. Right here. The Fed has made a recession inevitable. 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 It's not the Fed that's doing it. There was something else. Oh, here's the other part. As for the United States making up the supply, the U.S. is on course to become the leading LNG supplier this year. But the LNG export companies are running at near full capacity with 80% of their cargoes going to Europe. That's now. 80% of what we are putting out is going to Europe. And this ability to kind of increase, not in the short term. What are you going to do now? That's the question that Europe is posed with. What are you going to do now? Your political leaders have put you in a situation going back for decades. No, they're not going to acknowledge it. Yes, the media is going to whitewash it, just like it whitewashes most of these policies. But at the end of the day, what you are paying for right now, at this moment, whether you're German, Spanish, Europe, any of these NATO nations, what you are basically paying for are the machinations of very neoconish people that in your government that didn't want to just live their life, play their Xbox, have sex with their woman, and do this, and just do the jobs of state. No, they wanted to be imperialists. They wanted to knock over governments. And so now, with the culmination of that policy, these are the consequences as the country they were going after responded. Yes, this was provoked. I've said that once before. I think it is obvious if you're honest. And all of this stuff is because the various people in your country didn't just want to deal with things in their country. They wanted They wanted to have geopolitical influence over the globe. Here's another one. If you're thinking about getting gas from somewhere else, not so much. OPEC output rise in March falls short of pledged increase. Here's another one. Saudi Arabia rejects U.S. requests to increase oil production. And this one. As oil soars, OPEC and its allies decline to offer relief. Now, why would they decline to offer relief? When oil price is high, they make more profit. So there is no incentive for them to cut or to increase oil production. Not to mention, the U.S. got itself into this. They didn't. We did. Why are they going to help us out and hurt themselves in regards to profit for a crisis that NATO nations basically cause? Why? Why would they do that? Not to mention Saudi Arabia and the United States are not on the best of terms. They are in great terms with China. So in this very specific situation, where are you going to get the oil from? So when Putin comes out, it says, rubles, pay us in rubles. Rubles is value here. Your other stuff don't. What is Europe going to do? At this point, we don't know. The oil at this point is still flowing. Putin called it a breach of contract. So that's basically where they're going with this. But the way they were supposed to basically pay for it, and I got to be honest, I have a hard time wrapping my head around this. Because to me, if a thing has value or if it doesn't have value, how can you exchange it? It's like, here's a fart in a jar. And it's like, okay, how am I supposed to value this? I'm trying to find the article. Sorry, I'm bad at doing two things at once. But basically, okay, right here. The thing I was having a hard time around my head around. Initially, my thought was, okay, where are they going to get rubles from? Okay, well, they don't have to get rules. They're going to open up accounts in banks. But then I started to think, well, wait a minute. If the euro and the dollar has no value at the point where you're giving it, how are you exchanging it for rubles? At the end of the day, aren't you still exchanging it for rubles in that situation? I hope that makes sense. Meaning, if you're giving me a euro and I'm giving you a ruble, well, your euro doesn't have any value for me because I can't use it. So how does that exchange take place in a way where something is given that is accepted with value versus something that is can't get my head around it? I'll read what they say though. And I think the market thing is the thing that may explain it. I might have to get Mark Frost. The document requires unfriendly foreign buyers of pipeline gas to create accounts in Russian banks beginning April 1st in order to pay for supplies. Under this mechanism, the buyer opens currency and ruble accounts with Gazprom Bank, pays for a gas supplies via transfer to a foreign currency account, and then the bank exchanges this currency into rubles on the Moscow exchange and then deposits them into the buyer's ruble account, as described by commodity market analysts at Oaktrade Investments, Oksana Luxchinba. The gas is thus paid for in rubles from the buyer's ruble account. Has something to do with a bank, has something to do with an account, something to do with some kind of exchange. Read it. I put the article at the bottom. This one has gone long. I was annoyed. I'm sorry. But I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I'm going to say subscribe. Let's see. The money made selling Germany weapons is plenty of incentive. Order of chaos. We have David D. Trudy is here. And when real men have a Saturday night off, real men watch Jamarl Thomas. Oh, thanks, David D. I appreciate that, man. Nice. Good looking out. Paul X, American oligarch, said profit is greater than people. Yes. Yes, it is. All right. I ended on that. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Thanks all.